Welcome everyone to the Outdoor View. I'm Wanda, your host for today, and I have with me here my husband, co-host, Bill Gaines, and John Norris, and he wrote The Hidden War, and he's going to explain to us what is going on and exactly what that means in California and across our nation. He's going to create a lot of awareness for the general public on how to remain safe when you're in the outdoors. And if you're a hunter or a fisherman, I would encourage you to sit down and listen, because a lot of this I had no clue. And I'm going to let John explain to us what's going on, where he began in all this, what we can learn from him, and what we can do to help and move forward being safe as we enjoy the great outdoors. So thank you, John, for joining us.
Awesome, Wanda. Good to see you. Good to see you, Bill. Thanks you both for having me on today. And, I was a game warden for 28 years in my home state of California. I'm now a Montana resident, but the Golden State is still, in my heart. I still have friends and relatives and spend a lot of time down there still doing a lot of work and education and public safety awareness on what we're going to talk about today. So everybody knows generally what a game warden does. But when you think of a game warden, you think of hunting and fishing enforcement, teaching hunter education to children, the hook and bullet stuff, catching spotlighters at night that are, taking deer illegally, or somebody taking an over limit of fish, or commercial marine sales, the undercover, nature of the commercialized wildlife market, black market all over the world. But if somebody had told me in 1992, when I was in Resource Academy 4 at Napa Valley College, as a 21-year-old young, wet behind the ears, pie-eyed cadet, that the last half of my career would be spent fighting the drug cartels out of Mexico primarily, and building and co-developing and leading a specialized unit of game wardens, a tactical unit of game wardens, to fight the drug cartels directly that are putting illegal cannabis farms up all over our national parks, our open spaces, our public lands, with EPA banned poisons on them, with punji pits in the field for anti-personnel traps, wildlife destruction, poison creeks. I would have said, you are crazy, man. Game wardens don't do that. That's not what I signed up for. But the sobering reality, guys, was that's exactly what I ended up doing the last half of my career. And myself and several of my very motivated colleagues would form up what was called the marijuana enforcement team, a specialized unit of game wardens in California that would leave routine, regular patrol districts under the special operations umbrella and now have a tactical unit to deal with these problems, because we had been involved in 5 officer-involved shootings at that point. Back in 2005, August 5th is a day I will never forget in 05, that we were working with the sheriff's department. We didn't have our own team yet, but now we were working on these clandestine cannabis farms. And before I go any further, I do want to differentiate between the illegal, unregulated, toxically tainted, environmental destroying cannabis farms versus an organic, regulated product by a legitimate grower. Now in California, and here in my new home state of Montana, we have some regulated medicinal and recreational cannabis laws that really have a lot of stewards of the environment that are trying to do it correctly as growers. There are a percentage of growers in California that want to conserve water, that love wildlife as much as we do. And for the legitimate market in California, under the regulations of California, they want to do it by the numbers. And the last thing they want to do is cause a public safety problem. They don't want to put a tainted product out into the market that a cannabis consumer could possibly, die from or become severely ill from. And they don't want to destroy waterways or decimate their wildlife and waterways resources on their properties. And they actually have allied with us for this fight, which is really a neat thing. You wouldn't think of cannabis farmers being embracing law enforcement officers on the game warden front, or vice versa. I say when we regulated on Prop 64, we kind of went from handcuffs to hugs and handshakes, with the percentage of cannabis growers that were doing it by the numbers. However, we still have a huge black market in California, regardless of regulation. It's been incentivized, unfortunately, with the current regulation structure. And the black market is now run by not only the Mexican cartels, but we're seeing the Chinese and Asian cartels as well involved on a national black market, and really using California and other states of our great nation as a wasteland to make their multi-billion-dollar profits for cartel crimes at the expense of public safety, human health, and is important to all of us thin green line supporters of wildlife, wildlands, and waterways. our wildland resources, those precious environmental resources that are fleeting. So when we had that first gunfight in 2005, it was 3 of us game wardens working with 3 really good sheriff's deputies from the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office in my old home area, the Silicon Valley. And this is going to sound oxymoronic when you say, wait a minute, cartel marijuana in the foothills in Silicon Valley, the tech capital of the world. That doesn't even add up. How is that even happening? And that's exactly what we stumbled on. We were assisting the sheriffs. We didn't have our own team yet. We were ambushed. One of the growers, heavily armed. It was August 5th, so it was harvest time. So they had armed defenders with a little bit of tactics, heavy weapons. An AK-47 went through both legs of my warden partner. And for 3 agonizing hours, we waited to get an air rescue to get him off that hill while I'm trying to treat him for shock, keep him from bleeding out. While we're also, we're involved in a gunfight and we have a suspect down. We don't know what's happened to a second suspect. That was a sobering moment for all of us that day, especially our injured young man, one of the best game wardens we've got, to what the environmental threat had morphed into in California and the tech capital, of all else places. Why would it happen there?
That blew my mind because I grew up in Santa Clara Valley. And so when I was reading your book, just all those areas that you spoke about, I just thought I would have never had a clue just how much was going on and how dangerous it is. It really blew my mind. And I mean, when I think about like hunter safety courses, I took a hunter safety course, but I don't recall being educated about how dangerous it could be for a hunter or a fisherman to go into some of these areas. And in my mind, I'm thinking that people need to be more aware of what they could be walking into when they're in the great outdoors. Am I wrong?
No, Wanda, you're spot on. And you brought up a great point when you talked about the hunter education element, because when I retired at the end of 2018 after 28 years with the agency, and have been on the outreach and education and training, mission since then, supporting not only the game warden efforts in California, but now nationwide. And I see other states actually that have less of the problem, have a whole section in their hunter education course and in their manual on what to do if you run into one of these grows for hunter safety, because it has become a problem that has exceeded and expanded well past California. Last time I checked, it wasn't part of our curriculum in California, which I feel a little bit embarrassed about as a retired game warden. I think it certainly should be. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it is part of the curriculum now. But California is literally the weed state of the world. I mean, really, we kind of dictate how cannabis, marketing and everything else is going to go, because we're one of only 6 true Mediterranean climates on the globe. So just like we grow great wine in the Napa Valley and we're known for great agriculture, great wine, we grow really great cannabis outdoors, indoors. And because of that, we have the presence of the black market really centered in California for the nation, of this illegal cannabis being grown by these cartel groups and other organized crime groups. And outdoor enthusiasts need to know the dangers, whether you're a hunter and fisherman. Now, fortunately, the one positive we have seen, one of the few positives I think we've seen from Prop 64, is that we've incentivized the black market with Prop 64, unfortunately, by watering down illegal outdoor trespass cannabis growing from a felony to a misdemeanor. That's what happened in 2016 when Prop 64 passed. I was shattered by that. I had presented this issue as the lieutenant for the marijuana enforcement team. 30% of my job, besides running operations and training and basically doing missions with my teammates, was outreach and education and talking to legislatures, lobbyists, cannabis user groups, enforcement groups, animal rights groups, conservation groups in the hunting world. I said, guys, we know regulation is coming in California, and let's do it right so we can maybe break the back of these cartels a little bit, so our environment, our water resources, and most importantly, our public safety does not suffer. I really pushed, you got to keep the bite for these cartels, illegal trespass growers, or illegal growing in general. You got to keep the penalties there. You got to give them some sort of deterrence to know that, hey, if I do this, even though I'm in a regulated market and it's widely accepted recreationally in the state of California or Montana or Oregon or Washington, let's take any West Coast state that I'm in frequently. If that's going on, you still have to have a harsh penalty if you're growing this stuff illegally on somebody's private ranch, you're in a national park, you're even doing it indoors and putting toxic chemicals on it and basically undermining a legitimate market. But unfortunately, we watered it down to a misdemeanor and an infraction for a juvenile offender. which basically made the cartels and any, well, the official term, transnational criminal organization, or TCO, which isn't only the Mexican cartels, it's the Asian groups, it's other organized crime groups, however you want to phrase it. They just kind of went, okay,
Well,
California's wide open, because if I have 7 plants in California illegally, or 7,000 like in a hoop house in Siskiyou County, and I'm a Chinese cartel, overlord, and I'm spraying these new Chinese chemicals that we're now seeing all over the cannabis in a hoop house, and we're putting on Tyvek suits with fitted breather masks that are basically hazmat suits, because we know the crap we're putting on this cannabis is so toxic to keep insects and bugs and fungus and everything else off. And then we're going to just ship that east and put it into the black market for the nation. Who knows what people are ingesting, right? Poisons like carbofuran, metaphos that I mentioned in the book. These things that were these chemicals that are so toxic, these nerve agents, anticoagulants that are so toxic, they were banned by the EPA from general use on agricultural products in America over 20 years ago. It's a felony to possess or even use them without special licensing. And ironically, guys, I was just in our U.S. Congress testifying at the Capitol for the first time last week to a natural resources subcommittee on border protection and saving our parks, related specifically to the cartel threat, not on the border, but in middle America, in California, in the Midwest, on things like, what are these poisons? We've never heard of them. How is the black market of cannabis so decimating when we see it popping up legally all over the country? And my question to, basically the congressional committee members and the congressmen and congresswomen that were on that was, obviously this isn't a widespread knowledge, to the American people. And we didn't name, the second book, Hidden War, for nothing. I mean, this is something we've been working on. We've done outreach, we've done education, we've done documentaries, we've done investigative news stories for the last 15 years. And yet I still get people every day calling me up, or several of the congressmen and congresswomen's questions were, we had no idea the depth of this. We know the impacts crossing the border illegally. We hear about the fentanyl crisis. We hear about human trafficking. Thank heaven all that's finally getting the attention I think it needs as a public priority, as a national security issue that should be handled as a national priority policy-wise. But now they're starting to look at the cannabis issue and go, hey, wait, it's not just sedate weed. There's still something going on here with these poisons. And so bringing this into the light and looking at this as a national problem, hopefully will maybe create a better regulation structure if we ever regulate nationally for cannabis use, or we go state by state. I don't think we want to do it the way we did in California. It's definitely backlashed on us. And a lot of my colleagues, all of my colleagues in cannabis enforcement as game wardens, they're kind of playing whack-a-mole out there. They are diligently working to take down these grow sites. And when they hit 10 or 20 a week, there's 10,000 in one county like Siskiyou that they're going to get a fraction of, right? We kind of say, I think the analogy I really like is, you have this earthen dam on a pristine ranch holding back really good water for a creek, and the dam is just eroded, and the dam has such a bad infrastructure that holes just keep popping up every winter, and we're out there tactically plugging holes as we rate a grow and grow, and 5 more holes, Bill, kind of come out, right? So maybe we need to change the method, and we can't keep plugging holes. It's time to build a new dam. We can't throw law enforcement resources and expect to, right the tide or right the ship, if you will, when we're up against an incentivized market that's basically making these criminal organizations not millions, but billions of black market dollars at the expense of the resources of California and our other states in our great nation, as well as our public safety and our health and human threats from these poisons.
Well, I have to say, and I've said this a few times, that like you and Bill, you are so knowledgeable in the things that you do. You're experts in what you've been working in for so many years, and you've got so much knowledge, and the lingo that you guys talk is way up here, and you guys are probably laughing at me going, oh my gosh, Wanda, okay. But like, I'm not at that level. And so when I was reading the book, there were some things that were quite shocking to me that I think for the general public, I would think that with what my husband has been doing for almost 35 years, that I would have known some of this. And I didn't. I did not know this stuff. But some of the shocking things to me, I'm going to say 3 things right now. And it's going to probably seem so basic to you, but that's what the Outdoor View is all about, bringing it down to basics. So people like myself and others who wouldn't have a clue can learn from these episodes. But anyhow, I just didn't have a clue that these cartels were killing off our wildlife to do their grows. I didn't have a clue that they were killing off the fish and things like that. That a mere teaspoon of that poison could kill so many fish downstream. That just blew my mind. Taking tuna cans and putting them around their marijuana groves so that the bears and others would go and eat it and die so that their grows don't get messed with. And when I think about that and all this wildlife and fish being destroyed, it just gets to me. Anyhow, when you think about that and how they go to that length to protect these grows, and like you say, the billions of dollars that they're making, little old me, who's not out there hunting like you guys are, I think to myself, wow, what is it that my husband could step into one day? And what would they do if he accidentally did step into a situation like that? How do people who are out there hunting and fishing, how do they know a little bit more so that they don't find themselves in a circumstance that would not be a good one with these cartels?
Yeah, Wanda, that's a great question, and something we have seen, and it doesn't just impact the outdoorsman or outdoorswoman, right? It doesn't just impact the hunter, the fisherman, the the outdoor explorer, adventurer, whatever case may be, where you're going to be in a public land area like national forests, state parks. We have seen a drastic decrease in public land, clandestine, basically black market grow sites to public land or to private land. We've seen the shift over to private land. Now, there still are public land grow sites going on all over the country. They decreased considerably in California through the new regulation structure, because now I mentioned that Prop 64 with the watering down of the crimes and the penalties. Since we've incentivized the cartels, they don't have to go 8 miles into a national forest wilderness area to try to hide and avoid us that are going to put a lot of effort into taking that out, which is positive. The negative is now they go to rural private land tracts on sensitive waterways with underground water, and they hide in plain sight, knowing that if they do get busted, they're probably going to only lose their plants. But that organization probably has 50 other hoop houses around Siskiyou or Shasta or San Bernardino or Santa Clara County, wherever. So okay, cost benefit analysis, I lost 11 million, but I'm going to make, 800 million out of my 50 or, 100 growth sites. So it's just a business model, it's attrition. It's like a marketing budget that you got to throw out to make the big money. They're very careful in how they calculate, and they're playing to basically our shortfalls on the law structure. So we have the outdoor enthusiasts still at risk, because while they've drastically decreased in California, they are out there occasionally. What I learned when dealing with national forest experts and national parks experts, when testifying last week in Congress, is there were 300 plus clandestine cartel grow sites nationwide from U.S. Forest Service. And usually 90% of those would have been in California. Well, I don't know the numbers, but I would gamble, $100 bill and a steak dinner right now that most of those grows were not in California. There were still a handful in Cali probably, but all these other states that are going through a regulation structure, or they're struggling with regulation, or they just have open tracts of land without enforcement teams that are specialized in it, the Midwest states, Southwest, down on the desert areas, they're going to see this problem. So the outdoor enthusiasts have to know that this is a risk, right? But so does anybody that lives in a rural community that's drinking water or has, underground wells in the aquifer, and they're surrounded by all these hoop houses that are unregulated, but they're just not getting hit by law enforcement because there's just so many of them, because we're just out-resourced and they're out, they're just outnumbering us. So I'll use Siskiyou County as an example. I was in Siskiyou County last year with Jorge Ventura and Sadek Basu. Jorge's now with News Nation, but he was a lead reporter for Daily Caller, doing a second documentary, helping co-host it and get interviewed for it in Siskiyou County, called Narcofornia. Great documentary on Daily Caller, worth logging in and watching it. It's a 35-minute mind blower of what we experienced together in Siskiyou County. Now, I had been out of operations for 3-4 years at that point from actually going on, going on a mission, if you will. And now I'm immersed with Siskiyou County Sheriff's Office for the documentary with all the guys I worked with, back in the day. And now the whole shift went from a lot of the public land stuff, and now we're doing private land tracks. And I think we raided 3 grow sites in Siskiyou County on a Friday. Out of the 10,000 we had been watching all week and getting interviews of neighbors, ranchers, farmers, people embedded in Siskiyou County, the most remote county left in California, with Mount Shasta right smack dab in the middle of it. Mount Shasta with all that high elevation glacier water, one of the 7 natural wonders. And that's the water source for Siskiyou County, right? And it blew my mind. I mean, I worked Siskiyou County as a Met Lieutenant, as a team leader, and know my partners well after I moved on to my second phase into retirement. They're up there doing all of that, but it had blown up. It had absolutely blown up since 2018. And Prop 64, basically came into effect on 2016. And we saw failures in it by the time I retired by 2018, 2 years. But now we're 6-7 years into this law. And what Siskiyou County has become, with the Asian cartels basically running the county, and farmers and ranchers being extorted and told, hey, by these growers during the drought last year, and it's going to continue well after. Thankfully, we've had that huge relief from the drought with these great winter rains we finally had this last year. But your water is probably going to disappear, guys. Don't make a problem, and you won't have any problems from us. And there have been Siskiyou County residents, Shasta County residents, as one example, and it's not only limited to there, it's all throughout the state of California. The northern deserts of LA County experience the same problem, is another example. But these particular community members are like, we're done. We've been here 100 years. We've got a farm. We've got a ranch. We're a veteran community. We came here to have a small town, have a quote unquote calm American rural peaceful life with true, with Americans to support one another. And now we've got illegal nationals from all different places, internal and, south of the border, within our country, coming into these areas and basically stealing as much water as they need. There was animal abuse involved. There was gunfire at night. There was some intimidation, some threats. And, who you really want to keep in California, basically doing everything by the numbers and really appreciating the conservation element of what ranch life is like, what being a farmer is like. Some of our most staunch conservationists, and I still work with them in my old home haunts of the Santa Clara County or Silicon Valley foothills, are our cattlemen and cattlewomen. They're doing ethical cattle grazing, they're conservationists, they're enhancing habitat. They're some of the biggest conservation supporters. And I still brand cattle with them a couple times a year just to stay in it, and help them with their efforts. Farmers, feeding America, but doing it with water conservation, doing it without habitat damage. And then these growers come in completely on the black market and decimate all that and intimidate, and we lose that community. And it's pretty heinous. And another real bad byproduct on this is what it does to legitimate growers. I mean, basically, it's running legitimate growing out in California. The outdoor grow site regulated grower that put $1.5 million into this state-of-the-art outdoor grow center with water conservation, organic products only. They have, anywhere between 5 and 10 permits from various agencies to do the growing, including my old agency, my alma mater, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Water Board, to just name a few. And now they do everything by the numbers. And now they're completely outmarketed by the black market. They're undercut. They're having all kinds of problems within the structure of distributors not paying them what they're due and saying, I'm done. I'm out. I tried it. I lost money. This doesn't even break even. And those are not the people you want to leave the cannabis industry if you want to see cannabis industry in your state. You don't want to see the cartels there. And those are the ones we're giving the green light to. So I guess the moral of this story is other states take heed what's happened in the weed state in California, but most importantly, let's look at national policy on it. Perhaps let's look at it as a bigger problem than people really take heed to. When you look at all the other cartel crimes like human trafficking, child sex trafficking, the fentanyl crisis that we know the Sinaloa cartels and Jalisco New Generation, all those cartel groups out of Mexico are kind of running with support from China through the precursor chemicals being given from that side. So a lot of issues to face, but one thing to remember is it's an embedded element within America that we need to deal with, I think, is a national priority.
John, you mentioned, hunter education and the fact that California's hunter education curriculum doesn't doing an adequate job at all about highlighting for those that are getting into the hunting traditions, how to be careful out in the field when it comes to stumbling upon illegal marijuana grows. I've stumbled on them.
Yeah, right. You've been out there.
One of
Sure.
one of the first things I've seen was the irrigation hoses running, through areas in the middle of nowhere. And it's like, why is that here? Well,
Right.
I know why that's here,
Yeah.
right? And a variety of other things. I've talked to people that have stepped in right into camps. I haven't done that, thank God, but right into camps, didn't know it. And it's like, holy smokes, right? Fortunately, the people that I've talked to didn't stumble into somebody that was there at harvest with an AK-47, like you mentioned, trying to protect the camp. But that could happen, right? So what are some of the things that a guy or gal that's out there in the field, whether they're hiking, hunting, or whatever, but they're in the backcountry, what are the things that they should look for as kind of warning signs that they may be in the wrong area?
Yeah, it's a great question, Bill. Basically, it's what you said. If you see black polypipe going down the side of a hillside in the middle of a wildlife area or a national forest, that's a major red flag. That's a red alert, red alert, Scotty, we're about to go into battle, a shield's up. It's one of those moments because there's no reason for that to be out there. There's no legitimate agricultural operation going. There's no farming going on. There's no cattle ponds going on that far out. You mentioned it. You may run into a camp. I can't tell you, Bill, you mentioned, you hit a good point when you said, what if someone stumbles on this as a hunter? And I remember because one of the D zones, right when we were starting to do this cannabis enforcement, prior to forming up the Met team in 2013, I want to say this was way back in 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there. And I'm going to be very approximating on it. But it was a father and her daughter and his daughter going out for their first hunt. She'd just been through hunter education. She got her D tag, and dad was going to go try to get her first buck. And they actually stumbled close enough to a grow that they took fire. Fortunately, did not get hit because they had some field craft. They stayed in cover. They worked their way out of the area. Nobody got hurt. But that was only one of several stories I've heard of people being, held at gunpoint, realtors going into a rural property tract and they border onto a trespass grow, and maybe they don't get killed, but they have their phones taken. They get told to leave. All kinds of different threats. And then we have missing persons, certainly, especially in the Northern California area. I know Murder Mountain, the Netflix documentary, focused on this a couple of years ago, I think right pre-COVID lockdowns, about a 4-episode documentary series that really hit the missing persons coming into some of the human trafficking, like young men and women that come out to California to work in these illegal grow sites, to be harvesters, trimmers, whatever, and make a buck. And then they're kind of extorted and they're kind of held in place. And some of them don't make it home or they just disappear. And there's a real element to that. We're seeing that, and not only in California, but in other states as well. So we need to be aware of that. We're whether private land or public land, like you said, Bill, and anything that looks like a camp that doesn't belong, you're down along a creek and, you see black polypipe going into a shoreline or up on a bank a little bit. And maybe you see an impoundment in a creek on public land. That is a major red flag. Nobody can legally put a dam in, what we call a check dam or an impoundment, line it with visqueen, use hand tools to put some concrete in or rocks or dirt and take a real pristine creek, the headwaters, and now dam it up. And now everything that needed to live downstream is going to die because all that water is going to a clandestine marijuana garden.
Well, some of the things I noted in the book too is I think you mentioned that the water lines go underneath manzanita bushes and that the manzanita bushes create walls around these camps.
Yes. Yeah.
And so how often is it that people do walk into these camps and become trafficked? I mean, how often does that happen?
We can't put a number on it necessarily, Wanda, but you bring up a really good question. I can tell you, and again, this is going to go as far as public land grows. I want to, I can't give a figure because we know those numbers have decreased since everyone's gone to private land because they've been incentivized to do it in plain sight as far as the cartels or organized crime groups go. However, generally speaking, when I was by the end of 2018, our Cal tip turned into poacher line. I want to say 70 or 80% of those calls were all based on illegal marijuana going on, whether it was a private land grower next door to some, ranch stealing all of their water, or it was a hunter, it was an angler, it was an equestrian, a mountain biker, just an outdoor hiker stumbling on this thing. And those calls, they came in Countless. I can't even put a number on it. I was getting them as a lieutenant of the unit and farming them out to my guys, and we were kind of triaging, okay, check on this one. It's got a public safety element because where it's located. This one's more remote. Let's get to that one. Then we have to do what every agency was doing is we got to kind of, Band-Aid on the cancer, if you will. We got to go after the grows that are making the biggest environmental dent. They're on a sensitive waterway that might have endangered steelhead migrating, red-legged or say yellow-legged frog, any of the species of, either special concern or actually on the endangered and threatened list. And it's just, there's so much of that going on. So to put a number on it, unfortunately, I can't say, but it's a lot. Let's just say it's a lot. Out of hundreds and hundreds of CalTIP calls, 80 or 90% in California at that time were about that. And knowing how the regulated cannabis market and how the private land problem is blown up, I can't say this because I'm no longer, with agency and I don't have those stats, but I would be shocked if those numbers have not skyrocketed beyond what I saw up to the end of my tenure when I retired operationally at the end of 2018, just in general, because of all the private land illegal grows going on. And so many neighbors, like a Siskiyou County mother of four, that literally is living in the middle of several hundred grow houses, and all of her very safe neighbors that she grew up with generationally have all left town. And that's a true story that you'll see when you talk about the Narcofornia documentary, as well as updates when I talk about the private land element in the second, because this is the second updated version of Hidden War, actually, because so much has changed since the first one was published in 2019. It's a lot. Without a doubt.
Bill asked earlier some of the signs that you might see when you're out there as a hunter or a fisherman that would make you aware that something's going on. And I'm just curious. You said that a lot of times they'll go and they'll hide their tracks. How do they hide their tracks? They
bury it. Yeah, I mean, it is so crazy. If you see a grow site that's just 1 year, you're gonna have a lot of that trash and infrastructure, and they might bury it in a creek, they might bag it up and kind of put leaf litter and manzanita bushes over it, because obviously they're gonna come back to it. If we don't find it, there's no reason for them to leave. If they've taken the infrastructure and the time from their grow bosses to, find the water diversion, find a good water source, they're gonna keep that black poly pipe in. They're going to basically dam up that creek again just by, putting the hose back in and starting a gravity siphon. And then I kind of sarcastically call all that black poly pipe black gold, because I call it black gold because basically that black pipe, whether it's 100 yards or 3 miles, and I kid you not, we have followed a water line from Merced County over the Santa Clara County line along Pacheco Pass for almost just shy of 3 miles. On a historical grow site that had been in play for 4 or 5 years. This was pre-Met days with the Santa Clara County, my brothers from the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office with their marijuana eradication team. And I went, man, that's a lot of work. I mean, this stuff was 18 inches under ranch roads that private ranchers were driving for their deer clubs, Bill, on some of these private blacktail mule deer hunting locations. But not just think of what every gallon of that water they're stealing from a waterway, from a pond, or more, even more severely and more consequential to a pristine headwaters of a sensitive creek, and what that's equating to them in dollars. So they're stealing and killing a lot of wildlife, waterway, and wildlife species, obviously. But at the same time, they're making millions and millions and millions on their black market crop, hence the word black gold. So that black poly pipe is such an eyesore. It does probably the least amount of environmental damage compared to the poisons and the fertilizers and the trash that's left in these creeks if we don't reclimate and clean it up, which we now do. And that's something the marijuana enforcement team, when we started that in 2013, we said we need to make the reclamation and the restoration of those environmental damages a priority. So if you look at the triangle, the Delta triangle, the symbol for our sniper team on the unit, and I picked the Delta triangle because we're a 3-prong unit. Arrest and eradication on one corner of the equilateral triangle. Try to not only deter these guys, but try to arrest and get them out of circulation to at least prevent them from doing more damage in another grow site or in a fentanyl lab or trafficking kids, whatever. And then at the other point of the equilateral triangle, you have the eradication of a poison black market product, right? Could have carbofuran on it. You don't want to see that in the market. We got to bury that stuff and have it put in a hazmat type, disposal situation, because these are nerve agents and, major hazmat chemicals, the banned poisons we're talking about. And the one prong on the triangle at the top that always seemed to get forgotten was, what are you going to do with that site once you leave? Even if you get that cartel element out and they're never going to come back, what do you have behind you? You have a continual environmental crime. You have fertilizer seeping into a creek every year. You have unstable banks because they took out all the trees and the brush and the grasses on a bank. Now you have eroded silt that as soon as those winter rains hit, that goes right down a channel. Silt is second only to a banned poison. If you look at what silt does to the beds of creeks and suffocates fish and aquatics from reproducing, so it's nasty. So if we don't restore all that and take all that trash out and spool up that water pipe, those guys are going to come back. And something we learned, and I talk about this in Hidden War, and I think in the 4th chapter, of sitting in with DEA and with sheriff's officers out of the Silicon Valley, of a grow boss, basically a plaza boss level cartel operative that was responsible for 50 to 100 grows in Northern California, but happened to get picked up on a 22-pound methamphetamine cook in the winter months. Right. And this was before it was common knowledge that we're trying to broadcast nationally that don't think of a cartel doing cannabis production illegally as their own entity. That's what they're doing in the summer. Now, this was like a December or a February bust. So he was cooking methamphetamine. He was probably a gun runner. There was probably human trafficking involved. We just weren't on to any of that yet. But I got to sit in on that debrief and I got to ask him the questions that I sort of knew the answers to. I wanted to find out if they were rhetorical because we really wanted to sell reclamation to other agencies outside of conservation groups like Fish and Wildlife. And I said, so tell me, sir, and he was very candid. He wasn't one of these sociopathic gunmen, that we would see that we'd have to fight with in a gun battle. He was a businessman. He was kind of gentle-minded. He also had a massive prison sentence ahead of him and probably wanted a little relief on that. And there was something involved there, right? So the information, and as you know, Wanda, from going into the book, I was blown away. One, to have the privilege of sitting in on that, but that's the first time we got real answers from an interior of the Sinaloa cartel, because basically you're not going to get them to talk. You're not going to catch a grower in a grow that has a cell phone number for his boss and a first name, and that's all he knows. They're kind of like the Al-Qaeda terrorism structure where they only have so much information of who they work for and where they're around. So if they do get picked up, they don't give away trade secrets. Burner phones they use for two weeks at the most, and then they have another burner cell phone that they pick up, a pay call cell phone type situation. It's very, very organized. And so getting that real true intel was tough, but we got it from that grow site when we talked to this man. And he did mention that I am starting to see some of these grow sites that I'm responsible for actually being cleaned up. And I'm like, we've never seen that. All the water pipes gone. And I said, well, let me ask you this. If we go and do all that, are you going to send your guys back in and respool water line? And it's already on some master map somewhere that law enforcement has already tackled this spot. Are you going to go back and do it? And he said, after you put all that effort into it, we're not going to go back there. Why would we? I'm going to have to put $10,000, $20,000 in infrastructure. You've already cleaned up the environment. You've taken my water diversion out, which is really the hard part. Even though that pipe is probably that pipe is the most damaging when it's in the water. You take it out, maybe it's not going to, pollute a creek. But if we don't remove it, that is what I call a complete devastator if we leave it out there. Again, let's think of black gold as a concept. Once they can access the water, they've made their multi-million-dollar enterprise, and the water resources of the state of California have suffered. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, Wanda, and to you, Bill, when I say, the last 15 years from California, we've been in a constant drought. The one in the 2013 to 2016 and the one we just came out of, thankfully, from this great winter we had this last winter, they were they were like the peak of a century period of the level of water loss we had in Cali. So this cannot get any more sensitive, this water diversions these guys do. When we talk about the private land now, since most of this activity and water stealing shifted to private land, we need to look at things like they're not always next to a creek. So where are they getting their water? They're going into the city of Doris late at night, in the middle of the night, and putting water trucks that are illegal right up to the city water supply in the big and sucking it dry and driving it into illegal grow sites. Or worse yet, when we were raiding grow sites in Siskiyou County, just the middle of last year, as we're going in to clear the hoop houses with the sheriff's department and clear it, look at poisons, talk to suspects, see the layout, I'm looking at well drilling trucks, personal, on a private piece of property of digging their own illegal well and going into the underground water or the aquifer there. So you guys know the millions of gallons that are being sucked dry by multiple grows, not just the one we were in that day. And that's getting to our water table. That's even more decimating than surface water in a creek. So the impacts right now to water, which is truly, I think, one of the last precious commodities left on the globe, not only in America, but the rest of the globe. Those are the impacts. And that's what we got to look at long term. And that's why I think the awareness for everybody to have, and then to know, hey, I don't want to see that in my state, and I don't want to see it in the rest of America. So let's try to do something a little different. Maybe hold back that tide a little bit.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed too in the book was you made the comment that Border Patrol really isn't a thing for these cartels. They've been doing it for God knows how long, and it really doesn't prevent them from coming across the border and doing the things that they do. And I don't know, as a public citizen, that just kind of, you hear all the political stuff going on where people are arguing over build a wall, don't build a wall, border patrol, no border patrol. Yeah. And I think to myself, okay, so does border patrol matter? I don't know. It's just some of this stuff just blew my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? Here's interesting though. We need to kind of, I think, dive into that a little deeper. One thing that came up in the congressional hearing last week, the title of that hearing was Protect Our Border, Save Our Parks. Right. Mm-hmm. And a lot of it was about how easy is it to get in and do this damage for these cartel groups. And the big debate is wall or no wall, border patrol, are they effective? They're not effective. So back in the Met days, even though these cartels were getting in, they had to do a little bit of effort. And I described that in the book. And basically we got the intel from that informant we talked to. And I said, so we deport you, you're a deportable felon, you're on an international watch list, and we bust one of your growers or one of your gunmen or whatever during harvest time. How hard is it for you to get him back into California? Because he's a vetted grower, he's really good, he knows what he's doing, and those guys are good. You cannot underestimate the ingenuity and the work they put into irrigating these grows, hiding them. They do a really, really efficient, hard, laborious job. And I don't want to ever disrespect or underestimate that, because if they put that much effort in, what do we have to do to stop that, right? How effective do we need to be to counter that? But basically he said, well, no, you'll deport our guys, and it'll cost me $4,000 to $7,000 in my organization to get him across the border, and I'll have him back. So yes, to that point, he's going to come back. He's going to be stopped for a week, maybe a month, maybe only a couple of days, but at least there was something he had to do. And an organization had to say, hey, we're going to put some money into this, and you're going to get across. Now, fast forward to after that, when we were experiencing that, this new wall policy came up with the previous administration under Trump. Now, what do law enforcement in general say down on the border? And this was a big debate in Congress last week. And you saw both sides from witnesses. And what I can say, and I'll talk my personal opinion and what I know just from the experience of filming a Thin Green Line pilot film for my TV series, online, YouTube, Recoil TV, down on the border shortly after retirement. And this was right when the wall was starting to be built. And this was right before the change of administration happened. And you talk to any border agent down there, and I hear from a lot of them, they go, that wall will help. Will it prevent illegal crossing? Absolutely not. But will it slow the tide? Will it give us choke points to watch? Will it give us ways to focus our attention on efforts to slow the tide? Without a doubt, in my opinion, and you talk to any law enforcement, anybody working the border down there, they will say, yes, we need the wall to help, not to prevent it, not to solve the problem, but we do need the wall so we can focus. Right now, with what the agents are seeing with the wall being completely stopped, and then the whole Title 42 debacle, and then the expiration of Title 42, the flooding of illegal immigrants from multiple nations, not just Mexico, not just cartels, but we're looking at terrorists, guys. We're looking at 200 or 300 known terrorists on the International Terrorist Watch List that are here, confirmed. And now Hamas and all of the radicalized stuff that's just recently happened in the last week and a half down in Israel, and that conflict, and all the news feeds today and yesterday are about non-Latins, not Mexican or Hondurans or anything else coming across the border. It's military-age Chinese males with passports. And they're getting found in grow sites in Northern California in Siskiyou County and Shasta as recently as a month ago with new poisons that come from China that aren't carbofuran. They're not the imported stuff from Tijuana, right? That the Mexican cartels are bringing across. They're Chinese growers, Hmong growers in Northern California, in Southern California, now dominating the black market, coming illegally, freely across the border with no wall, no check, exemptions by the flood, and using these new poisons. And this is not an exaggeration. And we've confirmed that instead of just spraying them all over the plants or in the waterways with the suits on, they're mixing them in like paint cans and they're burning them. And they're getting, it's called a smudge pot. And they're getting this aroma of smoke that goes all over inside the hoop house and saturates into the leaves, into basically soaks in as kind of a smoky haze. Now, I don't know a whole lot about, aeration chemistry or any of that, but that doesn't sound really good. And when they're talking about these new Chinese chemicals being as deadly, if not more so, than the carbofuran and Q-furan that came in and putting this on the cannabis, and these guys are getting across with I mean, it's not even a hiccup. So long-windedly, Wanda, I think what I'm getting to is I believe we have to have some semblance of border protection. I mean, and I don't ever want to talk about border protection as an anti-immigration message whatsoever. These are two separate issues. We're not talking about immigration. Immigration is a beautiful thing for America. We're a melting pot. We're all part of the immigration scheme. And, immigration is something different that made our great nation what it is. We're talking about deportable felons coming to America to do harm to us, whether they're terrorists, whether they're cartel growers, whether they're human traffickers, and using America as a middleman to exercise that at our expense. So no, I do think there needs to be some control down there. And even in the Hidden War era that I'm writing about, there were some hiccups for them to get across. And I think we were on our way to having more improved border control. We certainly were, with the direction the previous administration was going. And of course, that got halted immediately for whatever reason. And now we saw the backlash. And it doesn't matter where you sit on the political spectrum. All you got to do is watch cause and effect and what's not working. And for the US Congress right now to have so many potential border control bills up and looking at the issues that we're talking about today and requiring testimony on that tells me that it's a hot button issue. And personally, I'm glad it is, because those of us that have fought these guys at gunpoint or at knife or had to, go fisticuffs and seen some of the viciousness we've seen in grows from these cartel criminals, it's nothing you want your American kids to ever encounter some of the individuals we've had to deal with in grow sites. So whatever we can do to slow the tide, we're not going to stop it again, but to slow the tide, I'm all for.
So for people like myself or the general public who are just learning about all these things, the Hidden War, no matter what side of the political fence that you're on, something like building the wall is not to push off immigration.
Right.
It's to keep us safe from these things that you're telling us about right now. Tell our viewers about the fur missile.
Oh yeah. I get choked up. I still get choked up talking about her, Wanda. Yeah.
I was telling Bill all about that. And
something, man, you guys, I'm glad you brought that up, because something that really put some light in this whole fight was the amazing canine partners, we've worked with, and the amazing canines we have in the Department of Fish and Wildlife's cannabis enforcement program still. But it really started with Phoebe. And Phoebe, as you just mentioned, the fur missile, she was affectionately called the fur missile by her handler, Lieutenant Brian Boyd, who, is at the end of his career with the agency, but still doing great work there. She was one of those one in a million dogs. Belgian Malinois comes into the state of California, gets a great handler, and now, she's going to be a dual purpose dog where she can do detection of evidence. She can search for murder weapons, lost children, the whole nine, but she's also an apprehension bite dog for a very dangerous felon that wants to do harm to us or to the public. And it was a new science, right? This was something, taking dogs into grows to deal with an element of these cartel criminals wasn't something any agency was really specializing in. And I think Brian did an amazing job of through trial and error of getting the fur missile on station to be really the premier example, I think, of what you want for that job. It took a lot of years. I mean, he was new, she was new. Our whole canine canine program was very new. But by the time she retired, and we retired her in the beginning of 2017, middle of 2017, she had like 116 apprehension bites. Most of those apprehension bites on cartel growers that were armed, that were pulling guns, that were going to do harm to us, or anybody in the public. And she had 800 or 900 arrests where people gave up and she didn't have to bite. That's mind blowing for any canine to do. And this is a Belgian Mal that our special forces, like our Navy SEALs, SEAL Team 6, all of our, military teams use the Belgian Malinois, especially in the global war on terror, for, apprehension, for biting, for everything to take down, any type of national enemy that wants to do anything but good for us.
Mhm.
So that was kind of mind blowing to some of my special operations friends in the Navy SEAL community, especially, and went, how does a female Belgian Mal in the state of California, under all those laws and all the issues going on, do that type of work? And I go, because the problem was there, we had the right leadership, and we were really lucky to have that dog. That dog personally saved my life 40 plus times.
That's what I was just gonna say. I was just gonna say it amazed me to be reading about that dog and to just witness through your book, The Hidden War, how she saved you guys, how instrumental she is in doing that work with you. And then when she was lost, it was just, it was so heartbreaking. It was like, oh my
It
gosh.
was, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she did such an amazing job, as they all do, I'm sure. But that's just something I'm not used to understanding,
Yeah,
And
it doesn't really add up. You don't think of canines for game wardens doing that type of job, but certainly that was, that was kind of, every now and again you get that 1 in a million dog and that 1 in a million handler, and they do magic together. They save a ton of lives. And the thing that was so cool about Phoebe, I've talked about this on other shows, is I had my little yellow lab, an English lab Apollo, who was a companion. She was a canine, or a companion dog that rode with me, patrolled with me. She wasn't going to bite anybody, right? She wasn't that. Our labs don't do that. I mean, all she would do is try to, like, hey, everybody, I'm going to lick you to death. Put the guns down. Let's have a chat. Let's work this out. No one needs to, go to guns today in this grow site. That's a Labrador. So she's never going to bite anybody. And Phoebe was just like her. Her and Phoebe would actually interact together and play like puppies throughout their adult careers as two completely different dogs. But Phoebe never bit an officer by mistake. And, at the end of the day or the beginning of the mission, if she was playing with her tug ball and, getting some bite drive going, or we had her on her back doing belly scratches, you'd think she was a family pet. But when it was time to go to work, hence became the name, like you said, Wanda, the fur missiles ready to rock. And she never missed a target, and she never bit an officer by mistake. She got really, really good at what she did. And it was 2017. I remember after she had retired, and officially retired, because she had come back into service, even though we wanted to retire her years before she was done. I mean, she was on our Wild Justice TV program. We did 3 years of the Wild Justice reality game warden TV show with National Geographic, and it blew up awareness all over the globe. It was a big hit. And she kind of became, kind of that canine celebrity during that time. So she was really nationally known. And when she's getting 10, 11, 12, years old, and she's still physically capable of being a certified canine and being operational, but we were trying to retire her and bring on these younger dogs because she had a great career, near misses, concussed multiple times from getting hit by growers and, deflecting stabbings and everything else. But it's real hard to replace that type of partner.
Yeah.
When you're up against it every day. And fortunately, we were able to replace her, but then leukemia hit her for retirement. I got that call from Brian Boyd, and that's one that, many tears were shared, many moments were shared, and then the whole team, human, canine, it's one and the same,
It must
four-legged,
take you
two-legged.
guys a while to get another dog of that magnitude that's so instrumental, you guys just lost our what? I think it was July of 2018, if I remember correctly.
It was. And fortunately, Brian had been working with another dog, and there's names of operational dogs I can't mention, but we have what I consider some of the best, if not the best, canines operating out there. And the nice thing is they've taken what Phoebe was and they've gotten even more efficient at it. And other agencies have dogs as good, and as efficient and as capable, because we're all working together as a team, knowing that they're invaluable. And what people don't realize, and there's a lot of legislation out to stop canines from biting armed suspects right now. And Bill, I know I'm preaching to the choir on this, and I've been called in to weigh in on it. And, good canine handlers like Mike Ritland, the SEAL team canine expert that has the Mic Drop podcast that I had a great interview with on his show. It's heartbreaking when legislatively and politically we start going, oh, hey, wait a minute, we don't want these canines to have to bite anybody or execute force or whatever. But at the end of the day, what people don't realize is if you use these dogs and you go up against an aggressive felon that is intent on executing deadly harm against officers and or the public, and that person gets bit by a dog to prevent deadly force on both sides, he's not going to shoot, I'm not going to shoot, we're both going to go home, no one's going to get dead that day, but someone's going to get bit and tore up a little bit from a dog. And I know this sounds very graphic, but I don't want to mince words on this thing. Mm-hmm. And we're basically by limiting what our canines can do with some great canine policies that have been vetted for decades. It's taken a long time to get to this point of what works and what doesn't work with canine apprehensions, to not only safely apprehend suspects without having to execute deadly force, safely apprehend suspects without having to receive deadly force, and also apprehend suspects where there is going to be some pain compliance from the dog bite, but the dog's going to come out and survive as well.
Yeah.
And when you start, manipulating that equation and water down what canines do, why even have them out there? Because it's just going to end up in a gunfight anyway. And we had, if you do the math and look at the statistics of how effective these dogs are, we were at 5 officer-involved shootings before we had canines on every mission, up until the time we started the marijuana enforcement team. And now we have a dedicated team, and we did 800 missions in a 6-year window. And I talked to Congress about some of these stats, and they're in the book, right? As you know, Wanda, in the book, of all those missions, we only had 1 officer involved shooting in a 6-year period, where we had a stack of them in the previous 5. And what's the difference there? The dogs, without a doubt. The dogs kept gunfights from happening. They kept suspects from, again, deadly force going either way. And I consider that a win. So if you want to preserve life and you don't want to get into those fatalities on either side of the officer involved shooting, you need to consider that and look at the big picture. So they're invaluable. And I'm glad you brought that up, because we weren't talking canines, and I went down memory lane a little bit on that.
This is just such great information, such education and awareness for the general public. Is there anything else that you think we need to make people aware of for staying safe out there when they're in the great outdoors at this point in time?
Yeah, well, I really appreciate being on the show, getting to know you guys both. Bill, I've heard of you and the good work you've always done, from the in the political arena. We just never crossed paths yet, so it's a real privilege to connect with you, and I appreciate anything you're doing. And Wanda, same thing. What you guys are doing on the Outdoor View, I think, especially in the state of California, is critical. It's bringing out real issues. I try to unify as much as I can. I stay out of the political world. I think when political motivations and individual agendas, and especially when money's at stake, I think bad policy gets written. I think that's kind of what's happened with Prop 64. And I think basically the California and ultimately the American public, as well as the resources of California and the rest of the nation, are suffering largely because of politics and how they land on policy. And I think if you just look at human safety and health concerns, and you look at resource protection, which all 3 of us on this conversation are near and dear to love, are wildlands and wildlife and waterways, let that drive the bus. And I know that's a very naive way to deal with the complexities of politics. And when I talk to politicians at the congressional level, the Senate level, or even in California, it's always nice to see how they weigh in on this. But one thing I can say about this issue, that's going to benefit us on the political world is when you get all this information out. I've never seen a more bipartisan unity than on the hidden war issue. Because no matter where you sit on cannabis, no matter where you sit on the border wall, no matter where you sit on gun control, no matter where you sit on any of these hot button issues that we seem to be so divisive on the left and the right, nobody wants to see their water poisoned. Nobody wants to not be able to see a black-tailed or mule deer fawn, grandkids, kids, the next generation, our friends and our family. And nobody wants to see a cartel gunman or somebody that could abduct their child or put a deadly fentanyl pill in an upcoming young American teenage valedictorian of a Silicon Valley high school, slated to do beautiful things. And the next morning, after taking a pill for a knee ache that happened to be a deadly fentanyl pill, is dead the next morning when her mom tries to wake her up. And all she did was go to bed early to do homework. Nobody can, I don't care where you sit on the political spectrum. How do you deny that? How do we not come together as a country and say, this issue, this domestic embedded presence of transnational criminal organizations, these cartels, are the biggest threat to the American public safety and our resources, period. So let's handle it like anything we would. A terrorist event, an attack in 9/11, there's no difference. There's no difference. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. And I think for everybody moving forward, that's what we're going to need. We're going to need to unify, put our differences aside. We can, get nasty in Congress on the other issues, but this is one that's near and dear to everybody, and it affects every American, no matter where you live. So I just want to promote that. I know you guys do as well. And I am available for questions via email. I'm at johnnorris.com is my website. You can link directly to my email. You can see the books, the TV shows, the YouTube channel goes into a ton of stuff. I got 53 videos up there, from our Thin Green Line film series pilot to investigative news documentaries, other snippets. The congressional testimony will be up there shortly, things like that. And certainly anything I can do to help you guys and all the great work you're doing on the Outdoor View, I'm all for it. So reach out anytime. And thanks so much for having me on today.
John, before you leave, tell us a little bit about your book, The Hidden War, because I know Wanda's read it. I mean, she's absolutely couldn't put it down.
Yeah.
She could not put it down. So how do they get a hold of that again? Tell us a little bit about the book and how they can get one.
Yeah, no, thanks, Bill, for that lead in. So this is the actual second edition of Hidden War. The first one published and dropped publicly in April of 2019 at the NRA Annual, largely because Colonel Oliver North was a big supporter of it, read it, wanted it dropped at the NRA Annual because he was the president at the time. So my publisher sped up that. That was the first edition, and that went into all the mission chapters wanted that you've seen and read in this book. And it's basically taking us from a couple missions in 2012 that led up to the development of the marijuana enforcement team, why we formed it, what happened during those missions. We're going to talk about in the first chapter a cartel kingpin that actually there was a murder of a woman that, as you know, Wanda, from the first chapter, a woman that was an environmentalist living next to a cartel grower, was really outspoken about the environmental damage he did, and ended up dead and shot by a shotgun on the fence line one night. And that was just an absolute heinous example. And that was in the Silicon Valley foothills, literally 2 air miles from where I grew up in the city of Morgan Hill. That starts the book. And then we go in all the way up to I retire, end of 2018, looking forward, policy regulations, Prop 64, yes, no, maybe so, is it working? But that book sold out middle of last year. We did an Audible for the first book, and the Audible is really attractive because it's got an original score by a really good producer and I narrated the Audible myself. I read for it. Trammell Starkson, a Billboard artist record producer down in Atlanta, did a great job. I read with him for a week in Atlanta for the Audible, and he put a score in it with sound effects, with the water dripping, the helicopters, the canines, did it all. And I know, like podcasts, we're not really watching, we're watching podcasts and listening to podcasts, and we're listening to books. We're not sitting down to read books much, but we had to do the second edition, guys, because we sold out of the first edition. Jack Carr wrote the foreword for the second edition. Jack Carr is a retired Navy SEAL. He's the author of the Terminal List series. Chris Pratt plays the lead in the #1 hit Amazon Prime series. He's a good friend, heck of a conservationist. The first edition, which unfortunately is sold out, our very own Congressman Jared Huffman from Northern California, now in the U.S. Congress, who's been a great ally of these efforts, Jared wrote the first. So the second edition is now available on Amazon. The Audible that I just read for, the new Audible, is going to go up here shortly. The Audible has become the #1 bestseller in Audibles on Amazon in natural resource crime and true crime. I'm humbled by that. It's certainly, I'm very happy, but more importantly than the numbers is more and more people are reading it, or they're listening to it and going, wow, that's really going on. And ultimately that's what we're trying to do. So Amazon, and anybody can go through my website, through my johnnorris.com to get the email if you want personalized copies. And it's also available on my Instagram and Facebook social media channels in my link tree to buy a book directly from Amazon if you don't want the Audible, and we have Kindle as well.
Well, it's been an honor to have you here with us. And before we go, if you could one last time give them your website or contact information that they could reach you or buy your book, whatever you want to put out there right before we go.
You bet. It's my website is johnnorris.com, JOHNNORES, one word.com. My Instagram is @johnnorris.com, same thing. It's got the verified blue check because I have 4 or 5, no, maybe it's up to 8 now, imposters using my content. We're seeing this in social media channels all the time. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see the right one, but you got to look for it. And on Facebook, I'm the same, John Norris, JOHNNORES. So direct message through Instagram, email through the website, and I'll answer questions, anything anybody has. People that want to become game wardens, want to learn more about the issues. I'm mentoring a lot of young adults from across the country, actually, and other countries right now that want to get in to be part of the Thin Green Line as game wardens. And that's really, really awesome. I feel very honored to be doing that. And I extend that invite to anyone who's interested, because we don't call ourselves the Thin Green Line for nothing. There are not enough game wardens in any state, but coming from California, knowing the challenges we face as game wardens in California, and Bill, I know you know this from talking to the leadership in the law enforcement division. It's always a uphill battle to keep enough people in a position. And you look at the diversity of what we're doing now with special operations on the cannabis enforcement side, Marine, General Patrol. I mean, there's a lot of challenges in the great state of California because we have so much resource and such a diversity. So anything we can do to promote more game wardens out there, I am all for being part of our Thin Green Line. And you guys are helping with that today. So I thank you again.
Thank you for joining us today, John. Thank you, Bill, our co-host for today. And thank you to all of our viewers for watching. My name is Wanda from The Outdoor View, the place where we educate, connect, and learn to protect our outdoor traditions. Bye-bye now.